Hello and welcome to Chapter 7. This chapter is on sexual problems and solutions. So in humans, sex is not a purely natural, pre-programmed event like it is in animals. There are actually a lot of psychological and emotional and cultural and societal issues that affect sexuality in humans. And many sexual problems stem from these issues or a combination of these issues. And it is important to note that we tend to not refer to them as sexual disorders, but more often they're referred to as sexual problems because most of them are treatable and curable. So let's go ahead and take a look at the different types of sexual problems and how we define them and how we cure them and how we treat them, and all things having to do with sexual problems. Okay, so let's start by talking about what constitutes a sexual problem. The rule of thumb is kind of if you think you have a sexual problem, then you probably do. Everyone's sex life is different, but if you're happy with yours, even if it's only sex once a year, then you don't have a problem. So sexual problems fall into 4 different categories. The first category is sexual desire disorders. The second category is sexual arousal disorders. Then there are orgasm disorders, and finally, sexual pain disorders. And so the diagnostic criteria for these disorders, like what symptoms you have to be showing in order to be diagnosed with one of these categories of problems, is in the DSM-5, which is the Diagnostic Statistics Manual that allows psychologists to diagnose people with mental health issues, including sexual problems. And so if you look here on the slide, you can see the percentage of people or the range of percentages of people reporting different types of sexual problems, all of which would fall into one of those categories. So sexual problems are way more common than most people think. Few people really want to talk about their sexual problems, so we just assume that everyone is having great and normal sex. And so since the assumption is everyone's having great and quote-unquote normal, healthy, happy sex, this causes people to feel really anxious and nervous to discuss their issues if they are experiencing some type of problem. Half of all married couples have a diagnosable problem at one point, research shows. And studies have found that rates for sex problems in men is anywhere from 10 to 52% of men and 24 to 63% of men. Of course, these are wide ranges in percentage because it is really difficult to gauge accuracy and reliability when we're asking people questions about sex because so many people are uncomfortable disclosing the truth about their sex lives. And so instead of having precise numbers in this class, we often, as you know, work with these ranges of what we can probably estimate an accurate number is within. All right, so let's go ahead and watch a video on sexual dysfunctions. It's a great TED Talk, and afterwards we'll have our first lecture activity, so pay attention. All right, here we go.
Can you hear me? Yes, you can. So that's a nice morning, full of sex. Yeah, that's good. That's how mornings should be. Okay, so we'll talk about sexual dysfunctions today. I will try to understand what's going on there, what causes them. And my starting point will be what is a sexual dysfunction. A sexual dysfunction is a difficulty that an individual or a couple faces during any stage of normal sexual activity. So if you're having sex and you feel pain, you experience pain, or you cannot experience orgasm, that would classify as a sexual dysfunction. The interesting thing, the surprising thing with sexual dysfunctions is how common they are. So if we take men, approximately 30% of adult men suffer from, have a manifested sexual dysfunction. The most common one is premature ejaculation, followed by erectile difficulties and lack of interest in sex. For women, things are a bit worse. Approximately 40% of women suffer from or have at least one manifested sexual dysfunction. The most common one is lack of interest in sex, followed by difficulties experiencing orgasm and pain during intercourse. And I'm saying at least one because people who have one sexual dysfunction usually have another as well. So if a woman has a low sexual desire, it's quite likely that she also has difficulties experiencing orgasm, or she has pain during intercourse. Okay, so overall, it seems that at least 1 in 3 men and almost half of women have a sexual dysfunction. That's a very high prevalence, which leads to the question, why? What causes this? And some good candidates, I would say, is poor mental health and poor physical health. So, for instance, if you suffer from depression, you don't feel like having sex, obviously, or if you have some cardiovascular problems, then this might affect your erectile functioning. But most of the people who have a sexual dysfunction are mentally and physically healthy. That is, these factors do not really explain sexual dysfunctions. Yes, they have an effect, but in most of the cases, they just don't explain this. And this made me curious, just try to figure out why, what really causes them, why we have such a high prevalence of sexual dysfunctions. And to answer this, I employed an evolutionary perspective. Now, in the evolutionary perspective, our body is a collection of mechanisms or adaptations that enable us to survive and reproduce. That's what they do. So in this perspective, we have specific mechanisms which regulate sexual functioning. Which brings me to the question of why evolutionary forces have allowed considerable variation in sexual functioning. So if we take women, for instance, there are a lot of women who have low sexual desire and a woman who have high sexual desire. The question is why evolutionary forces have not shaped all women to have low sexual desire, or even better, high sexual desire. And one possible answer is that there have been weak selection pressures during human evolutionary time. And I can demonstrate what I mean by that with a different example. So, when lights go up, when this nice session ends, you will notice that people's noses are very different. That is, they vary in size and shape. Why? Why not everybody's nose is the same? Well, part of the answer is that during human evolution, there have been weak selection pressures on noses' size and shape. That is to say, an individual with a predisposition to have a small nose was not better off in terms of survival or reproductive success than an individual who had a predisposition to have a moderate-sized nose. As a consequence, all predispositions remained in the population, and what we have is this, or what you will see when the lights go up. So perhaps this was also the case with sexual functioning. That is, in certain aspects, in specific areas of sexual functioning, maybe in the past there had been weak selection pressures, and as a consequence, we have considerable variation. Now, the bad news is that we cannot go back in time to see what was there. Yet, we can get an idea, and we can get an idea using evidence from the anthropological record. All right, so what was happening is that in the past, our ancestors used to live in small bands of people who based their subsistence on hunting and gathering, and later on in human evolutionary time on agropastoralism. Now, there are modern societies today which are pre-industrial, and they base their subsistence on hunting and gathering and on agropastoralism. An anthropologist went there and studied them and produced a rich anthropological record. By studying this record, we can sort of figure out what's happening in these societies today, and we can infer what was happening in the similar societies in the past. Okay, so what the anthropological record tells us? It tells us that in these societies, mate choice is regulated. That is, individuals are not free to choose their own mates. What happens, for instance, is that parents control mate choice and choose spouses for their children. So, for instance, if their daughter comes of age, they would arrange a marriage with a man of her choice and would give her to him. And when they would exercise choice, their primary concern was to arrange, to establish an alliance with another family. So this is the common pattern in modern pre-industrial societies, and we can infer that this was also the pattern in ancestral human societies. And we don't even have to infer this because we have historical evidence. For the later part of human evolution, we have historical records. That is, we have records from ancient Greece, Rome, Byzantine Empire, pre-Victorian England, and so on. And these tell the same story. They agree. That is, in these societies, mate choice was regulated. Individuals didn't have much choice over their partners. Okay. So putting everything together, the anthropological and historical records tell us this story. We come from a society, from ancestral societies where mate choice was regulated. Now, this is important for understanding sexual functioning, for understanding the variation of sexual functioning. Let me be more specific about this. Let me examine ejaculation latency time. That is, how fast, how soon a man ejaculates after the initiation of sexual intercourse. Now, in an ancestral pre-industrial context, a man who would ejaculate soon after the initiation of sexual intercourse, this is in seconds somewhere here, allowing little time for the sexual satisfaction of his partner, wouldn't be better off or worse off than a man who would ejaculate later on, allowing more time for the sexual satisfaction of his partner. Why? Because in ancestral pre-industrial societies, women didn't have any choice of mate, so the sexual satisfaction of women was a secondary concern. Men didn't care about this too much and didn't matter much. What happens then is that both predispositions would remain in the population. That is, the predisposition to ejaculate soon after the initiation of sexual intercourse or the predisposition to ejaculate later on, both would remain in the population. And what we have today is this distribution, this nice distribution of ejaculation latency time. So you can see here, this is in seconds and indicates how fast a man would ejaculate after the initiation of sexual intercourse. Okay, that is why we have this distribution due to weak selection pressures. What's the problem now? In modern societies, things are different. Mate choice is no longer regulated. Women have choice. They can choose with whom they will stay with. And this means that a man has to provide some satisfaction to his partner to keep her. And in turn, yes, has to be. And this means that men who are here, and a lot of them, may be in trouble because they ejaculate soon after the initiation of sexual intercourse, not allowing considerable time for the sexual satisfaction of their partners. So a lot of men then, in a modern context, have this problem, and because this is a problem, we tend to label it premature ejaculation. But this is a label. It doesn't mean that those who are here are ill or there's something wrong with them. It's just normal variation. which still, however, causes them problems. It causes them problems today. 100 years ago, if you are here, no problem. Today, problem. Yeah, that's life. Okay. Sorry, before I go to this. This is the story also. This can be applied to women as well. So, for instance, most of us will have a mechanism which generates sexual desire. And the purpose of this mechanism is to motivate us to seek sexual intercourse. Now, in a context where mate choice is regulated, what happens is that parents arrange the marriage of their daughters, and they give her to a man of their choice, and they grant him the right to have sex with her. And he would exercise this right irrespectively of the will of his wife. This means that a woman with a predisposition to have a low sexual desire will not be better off or worse off in terms of reproductive success than a woman who has a higher sexual desire. That is to say, both women will have children, will get married, have children, and will pass on their predispositions to future generations. Now, today, however, things are different. A man needs the consent of his partner in order to have sex with her. And a woman with a low sexual desire might be unwilling to give this consent, or she might not be willing to give this consent as frequently as her partner would like. So this would result in a situation where the man would like sex, the woman wouldn't like, they would have fights, and eventually this would tend to classify low sexual desire as a dysfunction. So we tend to label this as a dysfunction because this creates friction between the couples. Again, women who classify, who fall in this category, that is approximately 40% of women, doesn't mean that they are real or anything. That's a normal variation. Okay, all right. So that's the kind of labeling we give. Okay, so to bring everything together, in order to understand where we are today, we sort of need to figure out where we came from. And we came from an environment, a context where mate choice was regulated. And as a consequence, this, on certain aspects of sexual functioning, there had been weak selection pressures, and these result in considerable variation in certain aspects of sexual functioning. Now, because the environment is different, this variation might cause people problems. However, this is a normal variation. At least in most of the cases, it is a normal variation. So that's, I guess, the take-home message of today, that most people that experience these difficulties, they shouldn't think that, okay, I'm ill or there is something wrong with me or whatever. This is a normal and a common and very common thing. But before I finish, I wouldn't like people to think that's, okay, fine, all right, that's, if I have this difficulty, all right, no problem, it's normal, I'm going home, and that's it. No. Perhaps people need to work on this if this causes them problems. So I mean, to go back to my example with the noses, let's say if I have a big nose, well, that's normal variation, okay? But perhaps this causes me some problems. I don't like it. It hurts my self-esteem. Aesthetically, it's not what I want. So even if it is a normal variation, if this is causing me trouble, perhaps I may consider to have some plastic surgery. Now, the same goes with the sexual dysfunctions. In most of the cases, people who face sexual dysfunction, that's a normal variation. However, if you are not satisfied with your sexual functioning, my suggestion is try to do something about it so to improve on this. So that's all. Thank you very much for listening.
All right, for lecture activity number 1 for chapter 7, I would like for you to tell me 3 things that you learned from this last video clip, the TED Talk video clip on sexual dysfunction from the evolutionary perspective. So if you could tell me 3 things you learned, just write a minimum of 1 sentence for each thing that you learned. That would be sufficient for lecture activity number 1, and again, this is chapter 7. Okay, so when sex therapists, physicians, psychologists are evaluating to eventually diagnose a sexual problem, they often use what's called the 3-dimensional model of sexual problems. And it's a method of classifying or diagnosing sexual problems according to either their duration, their context, or their frequency. And so for duration, there's actually 2 subcategories. There's primary durational problems and secondary durational problems. So duration clarifies how long a person has had the disorder. And a primary sexual problem is one that has always existed, and a secondary sexual problem is one that is occurring now but has not always existed. So an example of this would be either never being able to orgasm, which would be a primary sexual problem, or just not being able to orgasm with your current partner, but you had orgasms in the past, and that would be a secondary sexual problem for duration. And then the next category is context, and so there's 2 subcategories of context, either global or situational problems. So context clarifies the setting in which the problem occurs, and a global problem is one that occurs in virtually all settings, and a situational problem is one that occurs in specific settings but is absent in other contexts or in other settings. For example, if you're never able to gain an erection, that would be a global problem. But if you're just not able to gain an erection with your partner, but you can gain an erection while you're masturbating, then that would be a situational problem. And the last category is frequency. So frequency can be total or partial, and a total sexual problem is one that occurs every time in a given setting, and a partial problem is one that occurs often enough to cause distress, but not on every occasion in a particular setting. For example, if you're never able to gain an erection with your partner, then this would be a total sexual problem. But if you're able to gain an erection sometimes with your partner, then that would be a partial problem. Okay, so what we're going to start doing now in this lecture is breaking down the different causes for sexual problems, like biological or physiological causes, psychological causes, relationship issues that are causes of sexual problems, cultural and societal expectations that cause problems. And so before we dive into that, let's kind of review all of these factors and how they affect our sexuality, and then we'll talk about how they can create problems.
You remember hormones, those chemical messengers brewed up by the endocrine system that travel through the bloodstream and regulate all sorts of physiological and behavioral activities, from growth to digestion to sleep to sex. Our sex hormones serve 2 major purposes. 1, they direct the physical development of biological sex characteristics, and 2, they help activate sexual behavior. Estrogens, like estradiol, contribute to female sex characteristics and are secreted in greater amounts by females than males. And while all humans make testosterone, it's the predominant sex hormone for males, stimulating the growth and development of male sex characteristics. Now, most female mammals become sexually receptive when their estrogens peak during ovulation, but it doesn't really work that way for humans. Our hormones are more loosely related to sexual behavior, although studies have found that in general, female sexual desire spikes slightly around ovulation when women are most fertile, and males can also be affected by this spike, responding with higher levels of testosterone when ovulating women are around. But these short-term changes hardly compare to the larger, more major hormonal shifts that occur throughout a lifetime. Puberty, for one, tends to get everyone a lot more hot and bothered and interested in dating and gazing at posters of their favorite celebrity crushes, and later in life, as sex hormone production naturally decreases, our amorous urges and endeavors tend to decrease as well. Age affects our libido. But in the end, you might think of sex hormones as fuel for your sexual engine, and while an engine can't run on a totally empty tank, it also won't run any better or worse on a full tank versus a half tank. We need our sex hormones, but we also need the right psychological stimuli to turn us on and keep us going sexually. So, finally, let's look at some of these psychological aspects of sex. First, there are the very important social and cultural influences. Things like your families, your societies, your religions, and your personal values. Does your community view sex merely as the means for reproduction, or can it be fun too? What are the views on premarital sex and homosexuality, showing some skin or kissing in public? Then there are the influences of external stimuli. In Western society, we're constantly bombarded with sexually charged content, from movies and TV to advertisements, R&B slow jams and Victoria's Secret catalogs, and constantly looking at images of things that you find extremely attractive can lead to folks viewing more average people, even their own partners, as being less attractive. But our sexual desire is also fueled by internal stimuli, our imaginations and memories and fantasies. According to plenty of studies, at least 95% of people fantasize about sex at some point. The thing you gotta keep in mind is that none of these factors work independently of each other. How we respond to both external and internal stimuli can be really heavily influenced by social and cultural factors, and that is where a lot of the thinking and studying of sex has gotten really complicated.
Okay, so when we look at what causes sexual problems, there's a bunch of different factors, one of which could be biological or physiological causes, and these are things that occur when the body is incapable of responding appropriately, regardless of the partner, the setting, or the type of sexual activities that are happening. And so biological and physiological causes could be neurological, like spinal cord or nerve damage. They can be hormonal, imbalances in hormones that control and activate sexual responding could be responsible, like what we just reviewed in the video in terms of testosterone and estrogen and things like that. Sexual problems that are biological in nature can be vascular. For example, a person could have circulatory malfunctions, so their blood is not circulating as it should, so it's not able to engorge their sexual organs. And these vascular issues could be due to heart disease, diabetes, smoking, or even poor diet. Other biological sources can be physical injuries or trauma to the brain or the genitals or something in the nervous system. Biological problems can be due to alcohol. Alcohol is often referred to as the anti-sex drug. In small doses, alcohol can lower inhibition, so that makes people feel like more free during sex. However, it also causes blood vessels to dilate, which reduces the blood flow to the genitals and inhibits responses like erection or vaginal lubrication, for example. Some other biological and physiological sources of sex problems can be due to recreational or prescription drugs. So drugs, even nicotine, can inhibit the body's sexual response by causing plaque to build in the arteries so the blood can't flow to the sexual organs like it should. And then there are antidepressants like SSRIs, which stands for selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. And these are drugs that are administered to treat depression or anxiety. And they can actually cause various sexual side effects, especially related to inhibited or delayed arousal or orgasm. The next factor that can lead to sexual problems are psychological causes. And actually, most sexual problems have a psychological cause or involve some psychological component. And these psychological components will manifest themselves into a physical problem. So emotions like stress, fear, guilt, anxiety, or depression can trigger responses in your nervous and endocrine systems, preventing sexual response. So these emotions can activate your fight or flight response and shut down bodily functions that are not associated with being able to fight off a stressor or a threat, or run, flight from a stressor or a threat. So for example, when you're in the fight or flight mode, your body shuts down your digestive system because you don't need that to fight or flight, so your digestive system isn't functioning. And also your sexual response functions are not occurring either because you don't need them in a fight or flight situation. So basically your body shuts down functions that take energy away from the fight or flight response. And as kind of evidence of this, studies show that veterans with PTSD actually have higher rates of sexual problems, and newer research is even showing that PTSD can have a larger effect on sexual problems than even depression. So another factor in sexual problems can be due to relationship issues. So most sexual problems happen in the context of a relationship and are usually due to at least one of the following. It could be due to loss of trust. So to feel comfortable with sex, you need to be able to trust your partner. And so you have to be able to trust that they're faithful, that they're honest in expressing their feelings, that they won't inflict any emotional or physical pain on you, and that they are not withholding information that relates to the relationship. Another relationship issue that can lead to sexual problems is poor communication. So good communication is really the cornerstone of a good relationship, and the same is true of sexual communication and sexual satisfaction. But many couples feel embarrassed to talk about sex. However, like we've mentioned before, words enhance sex. Talking about it leads to a better sex life. And research shows that many couples feel a lack of intimacy, so making romance a priority can actually rekindle intimacy and lead to better sex. And then the next relationship issue that we see commonly correlated with sex problems is anger and resentment. And it prevents sexual responding in two ways. So the first barrier is that the fight or flight response becomes activated. And the second barrier is that it creates a psychological distance and loss of desire for intimacy. So in sex therapy, you have to help couples overcome any anger and resentment before sex can improve. And it can be really hard for people to get over anger and especially resentment, grudges that they're holding on to. The next one is conflicting sexual expectations. So everyone grows up with a different idea of how sex should be, and these different ideas and expectations really need to be worked through in couples. The most common conflict is frequency of sex, and another common conflict is who in the relationship should be the initiator of sex. But when these issues are talked about, they can be resolved. However, if you just kind of keep them secret and never voice them, they tend to just create and lead to ongoing sexual problems. The next one is a lack of respect. So either self-respect on one of the people in the relationship's part, or a lack of mutual respect. So a lack of self-respect is usually when due to a person having low self-esteem, and it will cause the person to feel actually unworthy of sexual pleasure, maybe on an unconscious level, but it can happen on a conscious level as well. A lack of mutual respect causes people to feel that their wishes, ideas, attitudes, desires, and unique characteristics aren't valued. And so when there's a lack of mutual respect, there can be a lack of trust, communication, and this makes lovemaking and intimacy nearly impossible. The next factor is a loss of love. So in relationships, when love fades, sex often fades too. We know that defining love is hard, but usually it involves emotional, psychological, and physical components. So generally, if any or all of these relationship issues we've discussed are occurring, then this can lead to a feeling of a loss of love. So these 6 issues are usually interrelated and they interact with each other. So it's usually not just one of the issues that are creating these sex problems, but several, and they're kind of overlapping. And then another issue is cultural expectations. So as we become more global through internet and economic trade, through ease of travel, people from different cultures are forming relationships. But different cultures can have very different attitudes about sex that are deeply ingrained in a person's sense of identity, their morality. So cultures differ in ideas about what's acceptable in terms of nudity, modesty, what's acceptable in terms of sexual behaviors, gender roles. Religions can affect cultural expectations. And then there can be different attitudes about sexual responding, like how a person should orgasm or when they should orgasm, or how they should behave while they're climaxing, like should they be moaning or not moaning. So experts are paying more attention to the issue of cultural differences and developing effective treatments to help people kind of come together on any disparity between cultures in their relationship with sex. However, many people from different cultures have healthy sexual relationships. Okay, so for lecture activity 2, I'd like you to think about the different factors that can cause sexual problems, biological, psychological, cultural, and tell me which one you think would have the biggest impact on creating a sexual problem and why. So if you could respond to that in 2 to 3 sentences, that would be perfect for lecture activity 2. All right, so now we're just going to talk about some general treatments for sexual problems that have been effective. So Masters and Johnson in 1970, as you know, wrote Human Sexual Inadequacy, which was a book that described a couple's sex therapy program for dealing with sexual problems, in addition to talking about the research findings from all of their studies on sex and sexual behaviors and sexual attraction and desire and all of those things we've discussed in the past. But in that book did include the sex therapy program, which includes mutual pleasuring exercises. These were a central feature of the program, and it was actually called sensate focus. And this is a treatment that is still used today. So sensate focus is a sex therapy technique that requires a couple to redirect emphasis away from intercourse and instead focus on their capacity for mutual sensuality. So it actually involves completely stopping intercourse and instead focusing on other sexual activities. Researchers often argue that in our culture, sex is considered intercourse and is very results-oriented and orgasm-focused. And so most sex problems happen at the point of intercourse, like erectile difficulties, lack of arousal, lack of orgasm, rapid ejaculation, or painful sex. So taking intercourse off the table completely allows couples to go back to the basics and discover sensuality. Many people remember being younger and having a no sex rule in relationships, but did other activities. And most people report remembering this time as being very sexually satisfying and the body responding very powerfully. But once intercourse starts occurring, those other activities become foreplay, with the goal being on intercourse and orgasm. So some of the techniques of sensate focus include, first, ruling out any physical problems. Second, finding private time with your partner once or more a week. Of course, time varies by each individual's couple's needs and schedules, but once or more a week is ideal. And then what you would do next is take each other's clothes off and spend time touching each other while focusing on the pleasure in it, so focusing how good it feels. However, you're not allowed at this stage to touch the breasts or the genitals. The goal is to experience fully sensual and pleasurable sensations that don't lead to intercourse or orgasm. And then after a few weeks of doing this, couples can begin touching breasts and genitals, but can't touch in a way that will lead to orgasm. So couples begin to feel free from the pressures of intercourse by doing this, and they don't necessarily feel the need to reassure their partner or reciprocate every touch immediately. And then after several weeks of this, couples can touch to orgasm, and then they can begin having intercourse again. So the results of sensate focus are that couples report feeling emotionally closer, erectile dysfunction tends to improve, arousal difficulties are often gone, sexual desire increases, and orgasm difficulties tend to improve. So research shows that couples that have deeper psychological and emotional issues may actually not be willing to do these exercises. And of course, couples that break the rules and have intercourse usually don't find success with sensate focus. And couples that find the intimacy too overwhelming often stop doing the exercises altogether. But let's watch a video on sensate focus and the proper techniques.
How to rev up your sex drive with sensate focus techniques. Rediscover the joy of sex with this 5-step program developed by renowned sex therapists. You will need a cooperative partner and self-discipline. Optional: candles, music, and creams, lotions, and oils. Step 1. Commit to not having intercourse until you get to the end of this therapeutic process. Even if lack of desire is your biggest problem, you may be surprised at how much you'll crave sex once you're forbidden to have it. Both parties should give up pornography as well during the no-sex period. Step 2. For your first session, remain fully clothed as you each take a 10-minute turn feeling the other person all over. Try to recreate the exciting groping of your adolescence. Don't speak during this exercise. Focus solely on sensation, both when you touch your partner and when you're being touched. Create a more intimate space with candles and soft music. Step 3. Wait a few days and then repeat the exercise. This time, do it in the nude, but avoid touching breasts, anuses, and genitals. Step 4. Wait a few more days and then repeat the nude touching exercise, this time with no area off limits. Again, do not speak, but if your partner touches you in a pleasurable way, let them know by squeezing their hand. Feel free to use creams, lotions, and oils in your foreplay. Step 5. After another few days with no physical contact, move on to stage 4, mutual nude touching. In other words, the turn-taking is over, and you can now do anything you want short of oral sex and intercourse. Step 6. Forgo physical contact for another few days, and then engage in non-demand intercourse, which means intercourse without the expectation of achieving orgasm. In fact, if one of you is about to climax, slow down the action. By this time, you both, hopefully, are panting for unrestricted sexual activity, which you can now enjoy. Step 7. Repeat this process whenever your sex life needs a jolt. Did you know? The average American couple has sex about 66 times a year.
So directed masturbation is another technique that's used to treat sexual problems. It's a sex therapy strategy in which the therapist advises the client on how to use masturbation activities to help overcome a sexual problem. So masturbation allows individuals to become more aware of their own bodily sensations, which can help partners explain what feels best to them, and it serves as a sexual release while couples are working on their issues. It also helps people work on their own sexual difficulties alone, so they don't have the pressure of being with a partner. So directed masturbation is used to treat premature ejaculation, erectile dysfunction, arousal disorder, and inhibited or lack of orgasm. So people who are experiencing a sexual problem with their partner don't experience it through masturbation. In fact, a study of 510 people found that only 11 women and 0 men were unable to achieve orgasm through masturbation. So this shows us that many problems are actually due to interactions with a partner. If a partner can't orgasm through masturbation, then generally we will start looking into deeper psychological or physical issues. But in cases where people are uncomfortable with masturbation, other treatment options should be explored, especially if masturbation leads to more relationship problems. Another important component of treatment for sexual problems is communication. And a common misconception about communication is that if a couple has to talk about issues, then something is wrong. But this is not true. Happy couples communicate. There's something called the myth of the lover as a mind reader, and it's the assumption that the other person should just know what you want. But of course, we are not mind readers or psychics, so that is a misconception. There's different types of communication. Nonverbal communication can let your partner know what you like and don't like. So this can be done through moans, groans, and body movements. However, it's often very vague, in fact, too vague to be effective, and sometimes moans of pain can be interpreted as pleasure. So virtually all sex therapy programs involve communication, and so it's aimed at helping people learn to communicate their sexual likes and dislikes, needs and wants. And it's kind of based all on the question of how can you be good at sex if you're not able to communicate your sexual preferences clearly. So now we're going to start talking about specific sexual problems. Keep in mind, like we mentioned at the top of the lecture, that there are 4 categories: sexual desire, sexual arousal, orgasm, and pain during sex are the categories of problems. So we're going to start with problems with sexual desire, one of which is hypoactive sexual desire, and this is a persistently low level or lack of sexual fantasies or desire for sexual activity. And so in order to be diagnosed with this, a person has to find this to be a problem in their life. Usually a person with hypoactive sexual desire is physically capable of the full range of sexual responding. And this issue can start as a low sexual desire with a partner and then just progress into no sexual interest at all. And most research on this is geared towards women because this has historically been thought of as a mostly female problem. However, therapists are now reporting that the numbers are pretty equal between men and women. So problems with desire are the most common problems reported in therapy. And it's also the most difficult problem to treat because it's usually due to deeper personal or relationship issues. So some of the common non-physical causes of hypoactive sexual desire include anxiety, depression, fear of pregnancies, STIs or pain, and past sexual victimization. And then for treatment, a therapist usually talks to each person in the partnership individually to see if there are deeper issues and what they are, and then they talk to both people together. The therapist also needs to determine each person's level of engagement in resolving issues, like how interested are they in actually resolving these problems. And often treatment involves using sensate focus, directed masturbation, and communication techniques, like we have previously mentioned. So many couples stop touching at all, holding hands, kissing, because doing all of those kind of physical gestures actually just reminds them of their sexual issues, so they just avoid it by not touching at all. Another type of treatment that is sometimes used to treat problems with sexual desire is cognitive behavioral therapy. And this is a therapeutic approach designed to gradually eliminate specific thoughts and associated behaviors that may be contributing to sexual problems. So CBT, or cognitive behavior therapy, assists in identifying irrational, faulty, and self-defeating beliefs and attitudes that underlie sexual difficulties. And so in this type of therapy, the therapist and the client work together to develop strategies to discard those ineffective cognitions and replace them with new, accurate, and constructive thought processes. So the idea is that the goal of this type of therapy is to replace undesirable behaviors with new and effective actions, as well as to replace undesirable thoughts with new and effective thoughts. So for example, if you're thinking like, I'm not worthy of sexual pleasure, this can be something that could be treated with CBT by replacing those negative thoughts with more positive ones, like I am worthy of sexual pleasure because all people are worthy of sexual pleasure, and so on and so forth. Okay, check out this video clip involving sexual desire disorder and women.
Viagra for women. 25 such products are on the market for men, but nothing for women and their satisfaction. Men have a little blue pill, so why not a little pink pill for the ladies? Mara Schiavocampo found out the answers are a lot more complicated, just like female sexuality. Sex. Sex tips. Orgasm. The big O. The talk of the talk shows.
Faking orgasm to me totally depends on how much money is involved. How much did you say is in that 401k? Woo!
But in a world where women are told they can have it all, when did making it turn into just faking it? We hit the streets of New York with relationship expert Siggy Flicker and found, though we try,
How many times a week do you have sex? Don't answer. Don't shut up!
and we try, are you satisfied with your sex life? I got it. Almost half of the women in America say they can't get no satisfaction, but 1 in 10 women has no sexual desire at all. It's a little-known condition called hypoactive sexual desire disorder.
Sex just seems like so much work. You have had sexual interest, it's reduced. You're bothered by this.
It's not just reduced, it's stay away, I don't want that, put that thing away. Even young women can lose their mojo. Catherine Campbell was once a promising country rock singer. That's what the night is for. She was known for her brash confidence, her sexy strut.
I used to love being in front of people. I used to love singing on stage. I used to love performing. I had a certain sexual attitude.
But when this young mother of 2 hit her sexual prime, everything suddenly shut off.
There's nothing sexual that I feel about myself. And so my confidence is gone. I don't want to be in front of people.
A lot of people think that this is something that people go through later in lives. Did it surprise you to be feeling this way so young?
Yes. And it was devastating, honestly, because I am 30 years old and I've got nothing. It's not that we stopped having sex. It's just out of obligation.
We asked Catherine and her husband Chris which one is most likely to initiate sex.
It actually may have been more me initiating before I realized I had a problem.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely was a two-way street at one point, and then it turned into a one-way street. And you can only go one way for so long before you hit a dead end, and now it's just a closed dirt road.
We asked on a scale of 1 to 10 how they'd rate their sex life together. Why'd you choose a 3?
I chose 3 because I'm obviously dealing with some sexual dysfunction issues. I'm not proud of this number, and if I'm going to say our sex life, I do think that it's my body that's failing me.
At one point, I would give that at least an 8 or 9, but now it's
You would have given me a 10 before. Come on, baby.
9.9.
Okay, all right.
So what's the answer? That's where sex medicine comes in. There are strange sex remedies by the score, from creams to sprays to shots in strange places.
The shot does have to be given in the vagina.
But what if there was a pill, like the one that turned ordinary men into champions?
This is the age of taking action. Viagra.
So far, there are dozens of drugs for men, but for women, that number is 0. But Cindy Whitehead, president of a company named Sprout, is fighting to get the first low-libido drug for women approved by the FDA. It's called flibanserin.
Biology is at play for women. I think that's what's been missing in this equation up until now. Viagra is a blood flow issue, a mechanical issue, and flibanserin works on key chemicals in the brain.
Some of the criticism has been that it isn't really that effective.
I would say, by whose definition? If we say it's modest, I'd argue it's meaningful.
And patient 24163.
This woman volunteered for the Sprout trial.
Istanbul.
Barbara Gattuso and her husband Greg once had the perfect marriage.
When we were first married, I would initiate no matter where we were, on a construction site, behind the bushes, behind a tree, in an empty house, and pretty soon there was just nothing. I mean, I would go to bed early so I could avoid my husband's approach.
But after 5 days on that little pink pill, her sex drive came roaring back.
On the medication.
On the medication, I chase him.
So in the perfect world of female Viagra, how many times a week would Barbara and Greg want sex?
Is that 13?
Her experience with that drug turned her into an advocate. Barbara joined Sprout's lobby group.
And next we'll go to Barbara.
We followed her to Washington, where she testified at the FDA.
I would like to see the FDA approve a treatment
for her right to sexual satisfaction.
We want to be whole again. We want to be the wives that our husbands marry. We want to have a normal sex life.
But the FDA said that flibanserin's modest benefits were outweighed by its risks and turned it down.
HSDD.
Despite the setback, Cindy Whitehead just did new testing on flibanserin and hopes to resubmit the drug for approval next year.
You know, one thing that Sprout and the FDA always agreed on is the fact that this is an important unmet need.
As for Catherine Campbell, she now believes that little pink pill may be her last hope.
I will be the first person in line waiting to get my hands on it. I want an option for me. I want an option for a woman that works.
Okay, so now we're going to talk about sexual arousal disorders, starting with male erectile disorder. So there is a belief that the penis should become erect whenever a man or his partner wants him to, and that penis should stay erect until they're done with it. So this belief is linked to masculinity and strength. And the word impotence used to be used to describe male erectile disorder, but now it's not really an appropriate term to use because it refers to a loss of vitality or potency, and so it's not really used by professionals anymore. So erectile disorder is recurring or persistent difficulty in achieving or maintaining an erection. And in most cases, it's easily treated. Some couples don't seek help because they have found ways of working around it that they're completely satisfied with. However, difficulties with achieving and or maintaining an erection are actually extremely common. Over half of men report experiencing this at least once in their lifetime, and reports estimate that by age 40, 90% of men have experienced difficulty getting an erection at least once. And then 10% of men between the ages of 20 and 40 years old say that they've experienced difficulty at least once, and 30% of men between the ages of 40 to 60-year-old report having difficulty, and then 94% of men between the ages of 60 and 75 years old report having difficulty getting an erection at least once. Okay, so let's check out this video on ED, or erectile disorder.
Erectile dysfunction or impotence is a condition wherein a man experiences inability to achieve and maintain an erection for a satisfying sexual experience. Erectile dysfunction commonly occurs in elderly people because the erectile capacity decreases with age. Erectile dysfunction may occur when the blood vessels going to the penis become blocked or narrowed. There is an interference with the nervous system that triggers erection, or when there is a reduced libido. Certain diseases may cause blockage or narrowing of the blood vessels, such as diabetes, hypertension, multiple sclerosis, nerve damage, hormonal imbalances, atherosclerosis, and heart diseases. Unhealthy lifestyle choices also predispose an individual to have erectile dysfunction. A person is more likely to develop erectile dysfunction if he is obese, alcoholic, smoking, or abusing drugs. Medications may also cause erectile dysfunction as its side effects, like with antihypertensives, antipsychotics, antidepressants, and tranquilizers. Psychological causes can play a part in the occurrence of erectile dysfunction. People suffering from stress, fear, gloom, uncertainties, sadness, or problems in the relationship can suffer from erectile dysfunction. Often, erectile dysfunction is caused by a combination of physical and psychological causes. A person who suffers from erectile dysfunction may experience symptoms that include difficulty getting an erection, inability to maintain an erection, and decreased libido or sexual desire. Lifestyle modification is the least invasive type of treatment for erectile dysfunction. Healthy lifestyle choices that can help relieve erectile dysfunction are to stop smoking, drink alcohol moderately, lose weight when you're overweight, stay away from substance abuse, and to be physically active. Erectile dysfunction caused by medication can be treated by replacing or cutting back the medication under guidance of a physician. Psychotherapy is used to treat erectile dysfunction caused by stress and anxiety. It is also important to talk with your partner about your complaints. Medications like phosphodiesterase inhibitors and testosterone can also be utilized. These medications can only be taken orally, injected directly to the penis, or inserted into the tip of the penis. Your general practitioner can give you more information about the disorder and its possible treatments.
Many men and couples that have ED experience complex emotional and psychological reactions like fear, embarrassment, rejection, shame, frustration, anxiety, and even anger. And actually, some couples just stop being intimate altogether to avoid another quote-unquote failure. And we found that even when ED has a physical reason, it is almost always combined with psychological reasons. So reactions based on the idea that a man should be able to get an erection anytime, every time, and the whole time might also be one of those psychological factors that creates ED. And this idea is actually a myth. It's very common for erections to vary during a sexual encounter. However, many women feel rejected if an erection doesn't occur. And this can cause a man to develop performance anxiety, which is the fear of not being able to perform kind of as expected by, these societal beliefs or these feelings that women have when their male partner doesn't get an erection. And so this performance anxiety can create a vicious cycle because the man becomes so worried about the erection, and this alone can actually prevent an erection. So like we talked about before, the body tends to shut down sexual response functions when it's stressed. So there's something called spectatoring, which is mentally observing and judging oneself during sexual activities with a partner. And spectatoring is caused by performance anxiety, and it can cause sexual problems. Because what you're really doing if you're spectatoring is instead of focusing on pleasure, the man is focused on judging his performance and worrying about if they're about to lose their erection or not. So common tests for ED involves monitoring a person in their sleep, wearing a penile tumescence monitor that counts the number of erections that they get at night. And so what's called nocturnal penile tumescence is actually the erection of the penis while a man is asleep. And generally a man gets between 3 and 6 erections per night or each time they enter REM sleep. Okay, so let's check out this video on nocturnal penile tumescence.
It affects grown men, little boys, and even happens to males still in utero. You know, the ability to pitch a tent in the morning without any actual camping skills. Now that we've got the one obligatory joke out of the way, we can get to the hard facts of nocturnal penile tumescence, otherwise known as morning wood. It turns out morning erections are part of the normal sleep cycle and occur multiple times throughout the night. The mind and body go through stages of sleep, from non-REM stages, which gradually become deep sleep, finally followed by REM or rapid eye movement sleep, which is actually fairly shallow sleep. This cycle occurs between 4 or 5 times a night. As you enter REM sleep, not only do dreams occur, but a few physiological changes take place as well. Namely, your brain begins to shut off some neurotransmitters in an effort to regulate your body and in some cases stop you from acting out your dreams. One of these neurotransmitters, norepinephrine, happens to be involved in the control of erections. Specifically, it causes vasoconstriction of penis blood vessels, actively preventing an erection. It's like a stop sign to blood flow. But as you enter REM sleep, norepinephrine decreases and testosterone-related actions are now able to take place. This leads to vasodilation or increased blood flow to the blood vessels, ultimately causing an erection. Why is this important? Well, similar to muscle and other tissue, at night this extra blood increases oxygenation, serving as a system of repair and helping to maintain functionality. But why do we often wake up to this pleasant surprise? Well, we often wake up just out of REM sleep, and as a result, see the remnants of this sleep stage. There's also evidence that a full bladder can contribute to morning wood. The increased bladder size through the night stimulates a region of the spinal cord, which can cause a reflex erection. The physiological benefit of this is to prevent you from urinating in your sleep. But most men can attest to the difficulty proposed by this conundrum after waking in the morning. Rise and shine. Got a burning question you want answered? Ask it in the comments or on Facebook and Twitter, and subscribe for more weekly science videos.
So there's lots of treatment options for ED. Pills like Viagra, Cialis, and Levitra provide hormones that increase blood flow to the penis when a man becomes sexually aroused. So they don't actually induce an erection or cause an erection. You would have to be sexually aroused in order for them to work and create an erection. So if you took a pill before, like an exam, and generally people aren't very sexually aroused during exams, they wouldn't have an erection during the exam from the Viagra or whatever. They would have to be sexually aroused in order to get an erection. But what's interesting about Viagra is that most men take it 1 to 2 times and then they actually don't even need it anymore because, like we've said, erectile disorder is so psychological that just knowing the pill is available tends to reduce the stress, which allows their body to have the normal sexual response functions and increases their erection. However, there are other treatments like penile implants. There's one on the slide that you can see there. And so it involves surgically implanting a pump into the male's testicles. And then in order to get an erection, you would squeeze the pump, which would shoot saline into rods that are surgically implanted into the penis. And that would create an erection. There's medications that can be injected into the urethra, and then there are hand vacuum devices that can be purchased online in order to kind of vacuum a penis into an erection, so to speak. Okay, and then the next arousal disorder that we're going to discuss is female sexual arousal disorder. And this is a woman's frequent or persistent inability to attain or maintain sexual arousal. And it has to do with clitoral engorgement and vaginal lubrication. So 1/5 of women under the age of 60 report difficulty with lubrication. And that percentage just goes up in women over 50. So women usually experience arousal disorders in combination with desire and orgasm disorder. Some of the causes are hormonal, like women have ever-changing hormone levels in a month and throughout pregnancy, after pregnancy, and as they age. So women, they do have testosterone, 1/10 the amount of what males have, and it's produced in the ovaries. And when this is low, it can lead to problems with arousal. Another set of causes can be psychological, like depression, anxiety, fear, guilt. And what we know is that being able to relax is the key to arousal. So if you're having these psychological issues that are making you feel stressed and anxious and sad and unable to relax, then your body's not going to respond as it's supposed to in the stage of arousal. And of course, relationship issues can also be a cause. So anger, fear of rejection, trust issues, imbalances of power, poor communication, infidelity, conflicting expectations, and abuse. And treatment involves methods that we've already discussed. So if the problem is hormonal, one thing that we haven't really talked about is that women can take extra testosterone to help them. And testosterone can come in the form of a pill, it can be put under the tongue, and it can come in the form of patches or creams. However, there can be negative side effects, like shown on the slide here. And some women have found an increase in sexual desire, fantasy, and function using what is often referred to as female Viagra. But female Viagra does not actually treat female sexual arousal disorder. As I just mentioned, it actually treats the desire issue. So it treats hypoactive sexual disorder. So let's watch a video now on female Viagra.
Why female Viagra actually isn't. There are more than 20 Viagra-type options for men who need a little help in the bedroom.
Because you can't get hard without a Viagra? Is it because you don't think I'm sexy?
I thought you'd think it was fun for me to supersize it for once.
And now our time has finally come. The so-called female Viagra has arrived. And while Viagra ads might feature silver foxes, the new FDA-approved little pink pill is actually designed for a younger crowd, women ages 20 to 49 who suffer from hypoactive sexual disorder.
But today, something was just out of reach.
The drug is called flibanserin, but you'll hear it called Addy at the pharmacy. So okay, it's pink, which we're into, but is it really the answer to enhancing our sex lives? Maybe not. The pill comes with some unsexy side effects and controversy. Here's what you need to know. Unlike male Viagra, which simply stimulates blood flow down there, flibanserin affects brain chemistry, which is where the less than fun side effects can come in. The drug works by adjusting serotonin and dopamine receptors, chemicals affecting both sexual desire and mood. So if you're already on an antidepressant, you can't take flibanserin. And while men can take Viagra on a one-off basis, women actually need to take Addy consistently to get the effects. That's a lot of pill popping. Additionally, you shouldn't take it if you've been drinking or while you're on birth control, which eliminates a lot of us. Side effects include low blood pressure, fainting, nausea, dizziness, and sleeplessness. Okay, so if you're still with us, let's talk about how this little pink pill came to be in the first place. The approval for the drug has been long and complicated, partially because female sexual desire is very hard to measure. So now that it's legal, after 2 previous rejections by the FDA, some consider this a win for feminism. But is it really? Why can men just pop a pill anytime they want to hit the sheets, but women have to consistently take a drug that messes with our hormones? Did we mention that only 8 to 13% of users are expected to see results? It's still a new drug, and hey, it's nice to have the option. Some trial participants have gone so far to say it saved their marriage when it brought back their libido. However, when the drug finally hits the market, it will come with one of the heftiest warning labels in FDA history. Maybe FDA approval of flubanserin will open the door to discussing more options. At the very least, women are now on the scoreboard when it comes to having their own drug. So what do you think? Is the little pink pill a win for women?
The third category of sexual problems are problems with orgasms. So we're going to start by talking about female orgasmic disorder, which is a sexual problem where a woman rarely or never reaches orgasm, or orgasms are delayed, which are also known as inhibited female orgasm or anorgasmia. Only 5 to 15% of all sexually active women have never experienced an orgasm. And most cases of FOD, or female orgasmic disorder, are situational. So many women can experience orgasms through masturbation, oral sex, with a vibrator, but not through intercourse. And some may experience orgasms with a partner sometimes, but far less than what they actually desire. So FOD can be caused by factors that are organic or psychological or relationship-based. For example, we know that alcohol suppresses orgasms because it interferes with the body's ability to respond to sexual stimuli. And SSRIs, or antidepressants, also contribute to inhibited or lack of orgasm. So it's common for women without FOD to not have regular orgasms. Women report experiencing an orgasm 11 to 34% of the time in the last month. And 16 separate studies found that 25.3% of women have regular orgasms through intercourse only. 64% of women report having an orgasm at some point in their life from any type of sexual activity. And not having an orgasm during sexual intercourse does not actually constitute FOD. So treatment is the same as we've discussed. Masters and Johnson developed a position where the man can sit behind the woman and she guides his hand in masturbating her to show him what feels pleasurable. And there's no intercourse allowed in this treatment. So it's kind of part of that sensate focus technique that we've already discussed. And then once the woman has achieved orgasm through masturbation, using this technique, then intercourse can resume. And the treatment for this is about 90% effective. So we've talked so far about women who are not able to have an orgasm, but there are extremely rare cases of women who can't stop having orgasms. So kind of the opposite of a female orgasmic disorder. So let's watch a clip on a woman with this disorder.
Most women can only dream of a multiple orgasm, but for Amanda Grice, it's a living nightmare. The 22-year-old suffers from a rare condition, which means she has 50 uncontrollable orgasms every day, which can happen anytime and anywhere.
Do you need a moment?
Sorry. Instead of being a beautiful thing like it's supposed to be, it would start becoming more of a nuisance.
There is currently no medical explanation or cure, so Amanda has to keep active through yoga and the gym just to find relief. Amanda has had her life turned upside down by the condition called persistent sexual arousal syndrome.
Pleasure is supposed to be a good thing, but when you have it for too long, it's like eating a lot of candy. Something that's really good and makes you really happy, but then you start getting sick from it because you had so much. And usually at this point I'd be crying by now.
Her orgasms, or tics, can be triggered by the smallest vibration, even from a car journey.
Exactly.
Okay. Wow.
So the vibrations going through the car just from the road, it's I could feel it onsetting my tics.
Amanda's unusual condition developed when she was just 8 years old, and it became so bad she even considered suicide. But it is only recently that she's had the courage to talk to her family, including older sister Crystal.
It makes me sad to know that she would want to kill herself because of this.
Amanda has been to 4 doctors but was dismayed when none had heard of the condition. Today she's visiting sex therapist Crystal Hollenbeck to try and get more information.
You're the first person that I know of that I've been in contact in the area that has any knowledge of this. So I'm just looking to get a little bit more information.
My recommendation with you would just be to continue seeking medical treatment, continue with counseling. Hopefully you're going to continue to get some symptom relief and learn how to manage the symptoms more than it overwhelming you every day. Enjoy your day.
Me too. I'm very much excited. I can now process moving forward to the next step, and that is finding medical treatment and help for my disorder.
Amanda has taken her search for answers online, where she's been able to discuss her condition with people from all over the world.
I won't stop speaking and raising awareness on this until something's done about it, and until it's taken seriously, not only in my country, but in the entire world.
Male orgasmic disorder is a frequent or reoccurring delay or inhibition of orgasms and ejaculation. It's a relatively rare disorder, but it's characterized by an inability to ejaculate after a period of stimulation adequate in focus, intensity, and duration for producing orgasm. 8% or less of men have experienced delayed or inhibited ejaculation, and it usually leads to extreme frustration for both people, and sometimes that leads to relationship problems. Usually, this is not something that has been an issue in the past or with other partners, and usually people with male orgasmic disorder have no problem achieving and maintaining an erection. They just can't climax. And this is usually caused by psychological and or relationship issues. And then there's also what's known as premature ejaculation, and this is a man's tendency to have an orgasm suddenly with little penile stimulation, typically just before, upon, or shortly after penetration of the penis into the vagina. It's also sometimes referred to as rapid or early ejaculation. And premature ejaculation is actually the most frequently discussed problem in therapy other than desire. 20 to 35% of men are affected by PE, and it may cause them to feel inadequate as a lover, ashamed of their perceived lack of control, anxious, and in some cases they report even dreading sex. So negative reactions can lead to ED, loss of desire, or avoidance of sex altogether. And the causes are unknown, but there are a ton of theories that aren't supported scientifically. That these men are more physically sensitive, that these men hate women, that they have higher testosterone. So all of those are misconceptions. Some people unsuccessfully try to prevent premature ejaculation by thinking about off-putting things or distracting themselves by thinking about baseball or whatever. Or there are also penis-numbing products available. But actually, premature ejaculation is easily treated with sensate focus exercises. Masters and Johnson created the squeeze technique to allow men to gain control over their sensations and recognize that ejaculatory inevitability that we talked about before. So the way that this squeeze technique would work is that the partner would masturbate the penis to the point of ejaculation, then stop and squeeze the tip. Obviously, you don't want to cause pain. And this stops the ejaculation and reduces the erection by 10 to 30%. And then you wait 30 seconds and repeat the process. So that's kind of phase 1, and then phase 2 is to do the squeeze technique in combination with oral stimulation or intercourse. So you kind of progress past just using your hand to masturbate the penis. And results show that men learn to hold off ejaculating for 15 minutes on average, and the success rate for the squeeze technique is that it works for about 70 to 80% of men. Okay, so check out this video on premature ejaculation.
If you're looking at this video, I can imagine either you're feeling that you might ejaculate sooner than you'd like to when you're intimate with your partner, or perhaps you're the partner frustrated that your guy can't last longer and you're just looking for some tips. Most often these men, even with self-stimulation, are not necessarily choosing the point or moment that they want to ejaculate. So it's one of those hard wirings that these men biologically need less stimulation to hit that reflex or point of orgasm. And back in the old days, the caveman days, so to speak, it would have been a desirable quality because they would have been populating the world. Today, however, it's not so preferable, and it's important to realize that there are treatment strategies and options available, including oral medication you can speak to your urologist about, desensitizing creams, and ultimately learning to be relaxed with a partner. The other reason that sometimes men experience premature ejaculation, which by the way technically is defined by it takes less than 2 minutes from point of penetration to ejaculation, is when men have really conditioned bad habits. Sometimes when you first started masturbating, you may have been in the bathroom or were in a crowded house and sort of felt like you had to do it quickly so you wouldn't get caught. And sometimes it's sort of been conditioned to rush an experience. And that bad habit absolutely can be reconditioned by focusing on relaxation strategies and slowing things down with a partner. So the first and foremost thing I want you to realize is there are several reasons you may be experiencing this, but regardless, that there are treatment options available. When it comes to treating premature ejaculation, I would say first and foremost, you need to relax. Oftentimes, even if there is sort of a reflex where you don't need as much stimulation to reach your point of orgasm, it's also true that chances are you're feeling nervous or anxious or really don't want that to happen, and that pressure that you're putting on yourself is getting in the way of you having the ejaculatory control that you're looking for. So take a deep breath, relax, and realize it's about learning what we call the premonitory sensations. And by that I mean, when you're getting sexually aroused, most men are focused on the sensations in their penis. But you also have to notice what's happening to your breathing, whether or not you might be tightening in your legs, your buttocks, your feet. What other indicators do you have that basically you're no longer in what I consider your safe zone? And by that I mean you're aroused and erect, but you're not approaching what I call that point of inevitability or that point of no return. So learning what is your safe zone, and on your own with masturbation, learning exercises that you can last 5 or 10 minutes is one of the first techniques that you often would do working with a sex therapist. So some of your treatment options are learning those premonitory sensations. You can also use desensitizing creams, or many clients use condoms because they like the fact that it cuts some of the sensation and stimulation. And you could also speak to your urologist or doctor about the potential role of medications. There are some off-label use of medications that are known to delay ejaculation, and sometimes they may be used as an effective treatment. I really want you to realize that if you can relax and let go and have a partner who's willing to sort of slow things down to help you realize what is that safe zone, that you're going to have really enjoyable sexual experiences.
And the last category of sexual problems has to do with painful sex. So there is a disorder called dyspareunia, and this is painful sexual intercourse that's usually experienced as pain in the vagina, the vaginal opening, or deeper in the abdominal cavity during or just after intercourse. It's rare in men, but involves pain in penis, testicles, or deeper areas in the reproductive tract. And in men, this is usually due to an infection, vigorous masturbation, or a latex allergy. However, it's 4 times more common in women. In fact, 40% of women report experiencing pain occasionally, and 15% experience it over a period of months. So the causes are usually physical, and experts want to call it a pain disorder that interferes with sexual activity. The most common cause of dyspareunia is lack of lubrication, which can be due to STIs, vaginal infections, psychological issues or certain medications, or an allergy to latex and spermicides. There's also something known as deep dyspareunia, which is an ache in the lower abdominal area due to the penis hitting the cervix. So altering positions and decreasing the intensity of the thrusting usually resolves this, and it can be a result of endometriosis or pelvic inflammatory disease. So if you're experiencing that type of pain, then you would want to see your doctor. There is another painful sex disorder called vaginismus, and it's a pain in a woman just prior to intercourse or other vaginal insertion, which is due to involuntary contractions and spasms of the pelvic muscles that control the opening to and outer third of the vagina. So contractions will take place just before intercourse when penetration is anticipated, or during gynecological exams, or when inserting a tampon. And this can actually interfere with a woman's reproductive health. There's not a ton of research on this, but estimates are between 1 and 30% of women suffer from it. It's believed to be mostly psychological, a fear that the penis is going to cause pain in particular. And the fear usually comes from past trauma, but also fears of pregnancy or STI, painful previous intercourse, or beliefs in myths about painful first intercourse. And so treatment involves discussing psychological issues and possibly the use of dilators. Dilators start the size of a pencil and then increase to the size of a penis, and they are inserted sequentially during masturbation. So the use of dilators is decreasing, and women are instead being encouraged to use their fingers. There's a newer treatment, which is Botox injections into the vaginal muscles, and this relaxes the muscles while the woman uses the dilators. And the treatment for this, the success rate for this treatment is close to 100%. A common complaint for women that experience pain is that the penis was too large or the vagina was too small. But genital discrepancies are actually highly unlikely as the cause of pain. You have to remember that the vagina is capable of expanding to the size of a baby's head. Okay, so let's watch a video clip on painful sex disorders.
Oh, hi, babes. Have you ever gone to have penis in vagina sex and the vagina was like, nope, ouch, that shit hurts, get out? You're not alone, and no, it's not in your head. Let's talk about pain during sex. Y'all have emailed me about this a lot over the years, so I'm going to talk about some of the most obvious causes to some kind of sneaky causes for pain during penetrative sex. And I'm specifically talking about pain in the vagina, not pain in the pelvic area, not a pain in the ass. There are a lot more causes of that. First, and perhaps most obviously, mismatched genitals, also known as the burden of the big D. You can ease this type of pain by making sure you're really aroused before any penetration, adding lubrication, of course. I wanna make a song about my love for lube. And having sex in positions that sort of bring things down a notch and give you more control, like cowgirl or spooning. Another cause is sometimes a tight vaginal corona, aka your hymen. If this is your first time putting things in your vagina, congratulations! You may need a little bit of stretching with your fingers and lube. I did a whole video about that too, it's right there. It's actually amazing how many videos I have about vaginas. Probably more than anyone, I'm like the vagina queen of YouTube. Menopause, that's another thing. Menopause causes a decrease in estrogen, which can cause some vaginal tightness and dryness, but good news, science is awesome and there are some remedies for this, so talk to your doc. Okay, those are some of the obvious culprits. Let's talk about those sneaky motherfuckers. The most common sneaky cause of vaginal pain during sex is actually infections. Yes! Yeast infections, bacterial vaginosis, urinary tract infections, herpes, chlamydia, gonorrhea. Some of these are sexually transmitted, some are not. Sometimes the pain during sex is the only symptom that you do have an infection. So go to the doctor and get screened for all the things. Another common sneaky thing, allergies. Maybe you're allergic to latex condoms. Wow, cool, look at these alternatives. Spermicides with non-oxynol 9 and lube that has some bad junk in it can also be irritating. Oh, and some people are also allergic to semen. So you know, just stay away from penises forever. Another cause, IBS. Probably not thinking about your bowel movements while you're having sex. Well, actually, maybe you are. But if you have IBS or symptoms of IBS, getting that under control can sometimes take away the symptom of painful sex. The last two common causes are relatively uncommon conditions, but they do happen. Like endometriosis, about 7% of women have a condition where their uterine lining starts to grow outside of their uterus, and then that tissue can start to shed just like your cycle. Ow! Endometriosis is kind of wild. The two most common symptoms of endo, really painful periods and really painful sex. So if you're at the end of your rope, you definitely want to talk to a doctor to rule that out. Another condition some folks have is called vaginismus. This condition causes the muscles in the vaginas to reflexively contract really, really tightly. A lot of people experience this as their vagina just being too small to put anything in. It can make sex really painful, if not impossible. It can stem from past painful experiences, sexual trauma, sexual assault, things like that, but not always. The good news is that vaginismus is treatable. This is a reflex that can typically be unlearned. I'm gonna put more info below as well as some books on the topic, and again, talk to your doc. But what if you rule all of these out? Keep calm. Promise you're not doomed to a life of painful sex. There are a lot of other way less common causes ranging from physical to emotional stuff, and it's gonna be a matter of really getting down to the bottom of it. Persistence and patience. Don't give up. In the meantime, remember, penetration is not the only way to have pleasure and intimacy with a partner, and if it's your partner who's in pain, remember to be very communicative, gentle, reassuring. With some of those basic healthy relationship skills, this does not have to be an emotional wedge between you and your partner. Okay, babes, wishing you the bestest, most pleasurable of sexy times. Shoot me any questions if you have them, and I'll see you next time.
Alright, that is it for this chapter, so don't forget to submit your lecture activities and complete the assignments associated with Chapter 7, and we will see you for the next lecture. Have a great day.